I never thought the day would come when my own son would walk away from me as if I were nothing more than a burden he was finally free of. But that is exactly what happened inside Nashville International Airport on a gray spring morning, 2 months after I buried my husband. "Mom, we only bought you a one-way ticket," my daughter-in-law Sophie said, her voice sharp but polished, as though she had rehearsed the line. She tilted her head with that smile people wear when they think they're being brutally honest for your own good. "The return trip, you'll figure it out." And just like that, she rolled her designer suitcase into the first-class line. My son Daniel walked beside her, silent, his sunglasses hiding eyes that once looked at me with love, but now refused to meet mine. They left me standing alone in the middle of the terminal with nothing but my small purse pressed tightly against my chest. No suitcase, no boarding pass, just a flimsy paper itinerary I now realized was a prop. They had never planned for me to come back with them. I watched their backs disappear through the security checkpoint. The sound of Sophie's heels against the tile echoed like a closing door. My throat burned, but no tears came. Not yet. Around me, the airport was alive with motion. Rolling bags clattered over the floor, flight attendants hurried in neat rows, and families laughed as they snapped vacation photos. A woman pushing a stroller glanced at me kindly, but her smile faltered when she noticed the empty space at my side where luggage should have been. I straightened my shoulders, refusing to let her pity sink into me. Only hours earlier I had woken believing I was part of something. Part of a family trip they called a healing getaway after the funeral. "It'll be good for you, Mom," Daniel had said, his arm around my shoulders. "A little air, some sunshine." Sophie nodded beside him, murmuring that it was time I stopped shutting myself inside the house. I believed them. I sold the last piece of jewelry my husband had given me, an old pearl set. Nothing grand, but it meant the world to me. I used the money to help with the flights because they told me everyone was contributing. I wanted to feel included, needed, loved. But standing there under the cold fluorescent lights, clutching a useless itinerary, I understood the truth. I had not been invited for love. I had been included for convenience, for what I could give, not for who I was. The loudspeaker announced final boarding for a flight to Orlando. And I flinched. That should have been my gate. That should have been my seat, somewhere in the back row, a paperback in my lap, the photo of my husband tucked inside its pages. Instead, I stood in limbo, discarded like an old receipt. I sank onto a bench against the wall, my chin lifted high though my heart felt like breaking. No return ticket, no suitcase, no family waiting, just me and the thin sweater I had worn for the trip. But as I pressed my hand to my chest, I remembered what else I carried. Not money, not luggage, something far stronger, something tucked deep inside my purse, hidden in an envelope I had sworn I would never need. That was the moment I knew I had been abandoned. But it was also the moment a spark lit inside me, the kind of spark that can burn a whole new path. 2 months before that airport scene, I was standing at my husband's graveside in Memphis, Tennessee, clutching a black umbrella against a drizzle that seemed to fall just for me. 41 years of marriage ended in a single Tuesday morning when a stroke took him before I had the chance to say goodbye. His name was Samuel, and he was the only person who ever made me feel like I was more than just someone's mother or someone's wife. When he laughed with his whole body, shoulders shaking, eyes crinkling, voice carrying across the room, until I couldn't help but laugh too. Now the sound of him was gone, replaced by casseroles, delivered by neighbors who whispered, "At least you still have your son." At least, those 2 words felt heavy, as if Daniel was a consolation prize rather than my flesh and blood. The funeral came and went, short and simple, the way Samuel would have wanted. He always said he hated being the center of attention. "Bury me quick and cheap," he used to joke, "and don't waste money on flowers that will just wilt." I smiled at the memory through my tears. He was gone, and the silence in our house grew heavier by the day. It was in that silence that Daniel showed up, Sophie on his arm, both of them dressed sharply, even in mourning. He kissed my cheek lightly, then stepped back as if he were in a rush. "Mom," he said, "we've been thinking. You need a change of scenery. You can't stay cooped up in that house all the time. Dad wouldn't want you like this." Sophie's hand slid into his, her nails perfectly polished, her eyes full of practiced sympathy. "He's right," she added. "You need to breathe again. We were planning a family trip for spring break, just a week in Florida. You should come with us." Her words slid into me like honey on glass. I wanted so badly to believe her. A family trip, healing, sunlight instead of shadows. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice trembling. I wouldn't want to intrude. "Your family," Daniel said, smiling with the same mouth Samuel once had. For a moment, I believed him. Later that week, Sophie mentioned everyone was pitching in for the flights. Without hesitation, I opened the small jewelry box Samuel had given me on our 10th anniversary. Inside were pearls, nothing extravagant, but precious to me. I sold them at a pawn shop, tears stinging my eyes as I handed them over. With the cash, I contributed to the trip. I thought I was securing my place in their circle, proving I was still needed. Looking back now, I see how naive I was. They didn't need my company. They needed my money. At the time, though, I packed with hope. I folded my softest sweater, tucked in a photograph of Samuel, and slid a paperback novel into the side pocket. I believed I was preparing for healing. Instead, I was walking into betrayal. The first hint that something was wrong came at the airline counter. I slid my printed itinerary across to the attendant with a hopeful smile, expecting the usual tap-tap of keys, the whir of a boarding pass printing out. Instead, her brows furrowed. "Ma'am," she said carefully, "I'm not finding a return flight under your name." I blinked. "There must be some mistake. I'm with the Morgan family, Daniel Morgan. We booked together." She checked again, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Then she looked up with that rehearsed sympathy airline staff must practice in training. The kind that says, "I'm sorry your world just cracked open, but I still have a line behind you." "I do see a Morgan group," she admitted, "but the return tickets are only for 2 adults and 4 children. Your name isn't listed." Ned. My stomach dropped. "That can't be right. Could you check again?" She gave me a polite smile, but her voice was firm. I already did. Behind me, the terminal was a blur of rolling suitcases and laughter. Somewhere nearby, Sophie's voice rang out like a bell, bright and amused. I turned and saw her standing near a coffee stand, Daniel beside her, scrolling on his phone. They looked carefree, like travelers about to embark on an adventure. I walked over quickly, clutching the paper in my hand. "Daniel," I said, my voice soft but urgent. "The agent says I don't have a return ticket. Can you check yours?" For the briefest second, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, maybe. But then he gave a half smile and scratched the back of his neck. "Oh, right, yeah. We figured you might want to stay a little longer, Mom. Enjoy some peace and quiet." "What?" The word barely left my lips. Sophie chimed in smoothly, her latte in one hand. "Let's not pretend. We only bought you a one-way ticket. Flights are expensive, and you've got plenty of time on your hands. You're retired, aren't you? You'll figure it out." Her tone was so casual it felt like a slap. "I thought this was a round trip," I whispered, my chest tightening. Sophie shrugged. "You're an adult. There are buses, trains. You've got a phone, don't you? Call someone, use Wi-Fi. This is a vacation, not a charity." I looked at Daniel, waiting for him to contradict her, to defend me, to say anything at all. But he kept his eyes fixed on his coffee cup. And then it hit me. Not only did I have no return ticket, I also had no suitcase. They had checked all the bags together at the curbside drop-off. Sophie had waved away my little carry-on, insisting, "Let us handle it, Blake. Just relax." My hands began to tremble. "So I don't have a flight. I don't have my things. And you didn't think I'd need to know that before now?" "You're overreacting," Sophie said flatly, zipping her designer bag. Daniel added quietly, "It just made more sense this way, Mom." Then, as though I were nothing more than an inconvenience, Sophie glanced at the departure board and tugged at Daniel's arm. "We should go. Our boarding group is up." And they did. Just like that, they walked away. No hug, no apology, just the sound of Sophie's heels tapping against the tile, carrying my son further and further from me. I stood frozen, clutching that worthless itinerary like a shield, realizing I had been left behind not by accident, but by design. I did not chase after them. I did not shout their names or beg them to reconsider. My knees wanted to buckle, but my pride forced me to stand straight as the crowd swallowed them, their laughter dissolving into the hum of travelers who had no idea a woman had just been discarded like excess luggage. I moved slowly to a bench near the windows, the kind with cold metal arms that dig into your sides. I sat with my back straight, chin lifted, the useless itinerary crumpled in my hand. For the first time since Samuel's funeral, I felt something stronger than grief: anger. They thought I would cry. They thought I would call neighbors, beg for a ride, scramble for a bus ticket. They thought I was helpless, but they forgot something. Samuel had never let me be helpless. With trembling fingers, I opened my purse, past the folded tissues, the peppermint candies, the lipstick I hadn't worn since the funeral. My hand found the envelope tucked deep inside, pressed flat against the lining. I had almost forgotten it was there. It wasn't money, it was power. Inside was the business card of Michael Grant, an attorney in Knoxville, Samuel's closest friend from his factory days. Years ago, Michael had helped us with our first will and mortgage papers. When Samuel had his first heart scare, Michael looked me in the eye and said, "If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me." I had laughed then, promising I would never need to. But now, sitting in the middle of an airport where my own son had left me for dead weight, I pressed my thumb over Michael's number. I didn't even hesitate. The phone rang once, twice, and then his familiar voice came through, warm but cautious. "This is Michael Grant." I drew in a breath so deep it almost hurt. "Michael," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "This is Blake Morgan. I need to update my will." Silence followed, broken only by the echo of rolling suitcases. Then his voice firmed. "Tell me where you are. I'll make time." In that moment, something shifted inside me. I was no longer the forgotten widow stranded at gate B22. I was a woman preparing to take back her name, her dignity, her future. I slid the worthless itinerary into the trash beside me, stood, and walked toward the exit doors where taxis lined up against the curb. I wasn't going to Florida. I wasn't going to sit by a pool while they flaunted their cruelty. No, I was headed to Knoxville. To a lawyer, to a plan, and maybe, just maybe, to a reckoning they never saw coming. The taxi ride from Nashville to Knoxville felt longer than the road itself. Rain streaked across the windows, blurring the passing fields and gas stations. But inside my chest, something sharper than sorrow was forming. I had been tossed aside, but I would not stay where they dropped me. Michael's office sat in an old brick building near Market Square, its windows tall and lined with ivy. When I stepped inside, the smell of paper and polished wood wrapped around me like an old memory. He rose slowly from behind his desk, older now, silver hair at his temples, but the strength in his handshake was the same. "Blake," he said, eyes searching mine. "I'm so sorry about Samuel. I didn't make the funeral, but I thought of you both." I nodded, my throat tightening for a moment. "Thank you, but I didn't come here to cry, Michael. I came here to change everything." He motioned for me to sit, pulled out a yellow legal pad, and clicked his pen. "Tell me what you want." The words came easier than I expected. "I want to remove my son Daniel and his wife Sophie from my will. Every part of it. Effective immediately." His eyebrows lifted. "All of it?" "All of it," I repeated, my voice firm. "They left me stranded today. They've used me, manipulated me. Samuel always said an inheritance is not a right, it's a trust. And they've broken it." Michael nodded slowly. "All right, then who do you want to name as beneficiary?" I reached into my purse again, pulling out a pamphlet I had kept from the community center months ago. On the cover were smiling gray-haired women planting flowers. There's an organization called Haven House. They provide housing and legal protection for seniors who've been abandoned or exploited. I want everything to go there. He flipped through the pamphlet, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. That's very specific. I've become very specific, I said. For the next hour, we went line by line through the old will Samuel, and I had once crafted with such faith. The farmhouse my father left me, the little savings account Samuel had built paycheck by paycheck, the investment certificates tucked away for Daniel's future. All of it I reassigned, not in anger, but in clarity. Michael paused once, looking at me carefully. You know they may contest this. They could claim elder financial exploitation if they find out you change things suddenly. I met his gaze. Then let them. I have proof of their betrayal. And I am not vulnerable. I am deliberate. Lock it down, Michael. Make it ironclad. He nodded, scribbling his notes with quick, decisive strokes. When he looked up again, there was something fierce in his eyes. Then we'll do this right. By tomorrow morning, Blake Morgan, your legacy will no longer belong to people who abandoned you. For the first time in months, I felt something powerful stir in my chest. Not grief, not fear, control. By the next morning, the paperwork was signed, sealed, and notarized. Michael handed me a folder thick with documents, every page marked with my initials, every signature pressed deep into the paper as though I had carved my decision into stone. I walked out of that office with lighter shoulders than I had carried in years, but I still needed somewhere to go, somewhere that wasn't the empty house Daniel and Sophie treated as theirs, somewhere I could breathe without the weight of their shadows. I remembered a brochure Samuel and I once picked up when we were visiting friends in Chattanooga. It was for a senior living community called Silver Pines. At the time, Samuel had laughed and said, maybe one day if they have good coffee. I never thought I would actually call them. Yet that morning, I did. By the end of the week, I was unpacking a modest one-bedroom unit on the top floor, overlooking a courtyard of magnolia trees. The walls smelled faintly of fresh paint, and sunlight streamed through wide windows, cutting across the quilt I spread over the bed, the one my mother had stitched by hand before I was born. The first night, I expected loneliness to hit me hard. Instead, a gentle knock came at the door. A woman about my age, with silver hair in a neat bun, smiled warmly and held out a plate of cookies. I'm Margaret, she said. We play cards in the lounge every Thursday. You should join us. It was the first invitation I had received in months that wasn't laced with manipulation. Days turned into weeks, and I began to build a rhythm. I joined the afternoon book circle, where 6 women and 1 retired pastor debated plot twists over cups of lukewarm tea. On Thursdays, I enrolled in a watercolor class, my brush shaky at first, but steadying with every stroke. I even signed up for gentle yoga in the courtyard, where the instructor always reminded us, "You're stronger than you think." I found myself laughing again, real, belly-deep laughter I thought had been buried with Samuel. Silver Pines wasn't just a roof. It was a community that looked me in the eye when I walked into a room. No one asked for money. No one sighed at my presence. They saved me a chair, called me by name, and wanted nothing more than for me to be there. At night I would sit by the window with a cup of tea, watching the magnolia blossoms sway in the breeze. For the first time since the funeral, I felt not forgotten, but found. And that feeling was priceless. It was nearly 6 months before I heard from Daniel again. 6 months of quiet mornings at Silver Pines, of book club laughter, of painting skies so blue they almost looked real. 6 months of rebuilding my life in a place where no one saw me as a wallet on legs. Then the phone calls started. At first, I ignored them. My phone lit up with his name, Daniel Morgan, over and over. 15 calls in a single day. I silenced the ringer and set the phone face down on the table, sipping my tea, as if his desperation was just another storm rolling past outside the window. But then came the emails. The first one was short, written hastily, in the early hours of the morning. "Mom, we need to talk. Please call me." I didn't. 2 days later, another arrived, this time longer. Sophie's polished words laced through it. "We may have made a mistake at the airport. It wasn't meant to hurt you. We thought you'd be fine. Daniel says you've always been strong. Please don't let one misunderstanding ruin the family." I read it once, then closed the laptop. A misunderstanding? No. Abandonment is never a misunderstanding. The final message arrived as a printed letter slipped under my door one rainy evening. I knew immediately it was Sophie's handwriting. Precise, elegant, as if every word had been drawn with intention. "Blake," it began, "not even Mom. We received notice from your lawyer. You've removed us from your estate completely. The house, the farmland, the savings, everything. We didn't think you'd go that far. Please reconsider. At least let us keep the garden behind the house. The children love it. You know how much time we've spent there, planting and tending it. It's part of their childhood, part of our future. Don't take that from them." I held the letter in my lap for a long time. Outside, rain tapped against the window, like impatient fingers. The garden. The very one they never once asked me to help water. The one Sophie bragged about online as her sanctuary. They didn't want the memories. They wanted the land. I could almost hear Samuel's voice in my ear. "They're not mourning you, Blake. They're mourning the money." And he was right. I folded the letter neatly, placed it back in its envelope, and slid it into the drawer of my nightstand. I did not reply. "Odai, ospshudnad." Because I had already made my decision, and the soil they thought belonged to them was already being prepared for something far more meaningful. Weeks after Sophie's letter, I walked past the community bulletin board at Silver Pines and saw a new flyer pinned neatly in the corner. Therapeutic Gardening Program. Coming soon. Sponsored by Haven House. I stopped in my tracks. Haven House, the very organization I had entrusted with everything. I read the details slowly, my hands trembling, but not from weakness, from pride. The garden Daniel and Sophie begged me to leave for the children would soon become something far greater. A sanctuary for seniors with memory loss. A place for healing, not greed. My land, my choice, my legacy. That evening, I sat in the library with Margaret and a few of the others. They chatted about novels, about recipes, about grandchildren who actually visited. I smiled and listened, the warmth of belonging soaking into my bones. When I looked down at my phone, I saw Daniel's name flash again. 10 missed calls, no message, just a ringing void that grew more frantic with each day I did not answer. But I didn't feel guilty anymore. One night, after yoga, I carried a framed photograph of Samuel into the courtyard. His smile in that picture was wide, his eyes nearly shut from laughter. I lit a small candle beside him and whispered softly, "They thought I lost everything when they left me at that airport. But love, I gained something they will never touch, my freedom." The wind rustled the magnolia branches overhead, as if agreeing with me. In the following weeks, I began painting again. Bright skies, bold flowers, shaky brushstrokes that didn't matter because they were mine. My book club friends started waiting for my opinion before moving on to the next chapter. At dinner, someone always saved me a seat. No seat thighs, no manipulation, just genuine care. One afternoon, Ruth, a widow like me, leaned over during art class and asked quietly, "Do you ever regret it? Cutting them out?" I dipped my brush into blue paint, considered the question, and then said, "I regret not doing it sooner." She smiled knowingly, and that was the end of it. No judgment, no more questions. Now, when the phone rings with Daniel's name, I don't flinch, I don't ache. I don't even wonder what excuse or plea waits on the other end, because I already know the truth. My son and his wife lost more than money. They lost their way back to me. And I've found my way forward. If there's a lesson in all this, it's simple. Family is not blood. Family is not who claims your house or your savings. Family is who shows up, who says your name like it matters, who saves you a chair at the table. I chose mine, and in doing so, I finally chose myself.